welcome to Little Starlight Podcast. Your hosts today are Andrea Jaeger. Hi, that's me, and Adriana Solarova. Our special guest is a multi-talented, gifted, special, kind-hearted, world-renowned commentator, leader, athlete, coach, captain, son, brother, uncle in the famous McEnroe family, father and husband in his own wonderful McEnroe family, and the ever-evolving Patrick McEnroe. Welcome, Patrick. So exciting to have you on my Little Starlight podcast.
Wow. Could you just keep it coming, Andrea? I mean, this is the most unbelievable introduction I've ever had. Thank you.
I would have kept going.
It's a pleasure to be on with both of you. Adriana, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
And I thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is exciting. So I mean, I could actually do a whole podcast just on your intro, but you have so many insights. So we're going to get to the questions right away. You love sports. Your family had 3 McEnroes attending Stanford, 2 McEnroes in your family lawyers, 2 professional tennis players. And we're going to start with an audience member, Julia, who, like your family, is an ultra sharp lawyer and loves sports. Her husband, like you, is an advocate for mental health. He is a psychologist. Great people. She is going to set the stage for your first question. In our last Little Starlight episode, we asked the audience reflection questions. Julia responded with and shared recently with me, I love the Olympics and plenty of great tennis to watch. Also love swimming and gymnastics. Such grace and power in all 3 sports. Julia continued sharing, I've been thinking about what advice I would give my younger self. That's one of the questions we asked audience members. And so what Julia responded was, trust your instincts, be strong but kind, thank God every day for the many blessings, love life, and smile. She continued with, here is you continuing to find wonder in every day. And that was so good and terrific advice. And it reminds me so much of you. That's why I wanted to bring it up. So the first question for you is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think being open about your issues is a great one. I mean, you and I have discussed that in the past about mental health. Simone Biles is a great example, right, of facing something that was very difficult for, one of the best athletes on the planet. And so for her to come out in the last Olympics and talk about it and take a break from it, like, that's okay. So I think I sort of had those conversations with myself when I was younger. I remember once playing in Japan, in Tokyo, and I was playing in the qualifying, and I was, that point where I had just gotten out of college, and I was pretty good in doubles, but I wasn't really making it in singles. And it was kind of one of those moments where I was wondering if I really should be doing this, for trying to make a living playing tennis. As you said, my dad was a lawyer. My other brother, Mark, became a lawyer. My mom was always worried for little Patrick that it would be hard to follow in the footsteps of his big brother. I reminded her, of course, that, she used to say, well, you're never going to be as good as your brother. And I was like, well, Mom, he is #1 in the world. So it might be difficult for anybody. But I think I would have just been maybe more open about talking about it to other people, getting help. I started doing therapy myself in the last actually 5 years or so. I used to do couples therapy with my wife, and we did parent therapy and so on when we were first married and first had kids. But doing it for myself has been a revelation, in the last 5 years or so. So I think I would have told my younger self to, because obviously in those years it was, you're not tough. And, if you talk about those kind of I guess weaknesses or whatever, they're not weaknesses. They're just part of who we are. So I think that's what I've learned as I've gotten a little bit older over the years and have my own kids, as you said, 3 teenage girls. But funny, my wife and I were chatting a week or so ago. We actually took a little trip, just the 2 of us, for 4 days, which was great because our girls are teenagers. So they're doing camp and, they're kind of doing their own thing. And someone texted us who had younger kids and said something to the effect of, oh, it must be so hard, to have 3 daughters. And we just looked at each other. We're like, no, it's not hard at all. It's actually amazing. Great. I mean, they're great young people. So I think somehow we've managed to give them the ability to just be who they are, and you always try to learn, right? From the next generation tries to learn from the previous one. So we like to think we're trying to push the ball forward for our kids and, just for the next generation and even for our kids. I'm here at our tennis academy right now in New York. So I was just on the courts with all the little kids and, it's great to talk to them and just let them be who they are. Be who you are. That's what I would say to my younger self.
That is so great and really cool. What you said is when you're giving advice to your younger self, because my very next question was going to be, well, what about now? What advice do you give to your present self? So many people, they accumulate all this information. They accumulate all these lessons and wisdoms and whatever they are, but sometimes they don't put them in action. And what you exactly said, you've put into action now. You put it in action for your present self, for your future self, for your family, for your children, and that's so important because it doesn't matter how much information you have, how smart you are, how wise you are, how accomplished you are. If you're unable to use what you have to make yourself have a fuller life or a whole life or a healed life, whatever that is. And so congratulations on that, because I know you've been a huge advocate for mental health. I mean, you mentioned Simone Biles. She took a break. I mean, first of all, on a good day, how do they do that stuff in gymnastics?
Right, exactly,
on a good day, right? If you're
crazy,
having like a couples thing, just won the gold medal, the team USA in gymnastics, the women's team, and the individual gold. And even if she didn't, we still would have looked at her as a champion. And she was able to go out and that training and to do that. And for anyone, there isn't no such thing as weakness when you ask for help and when you take action to get that help. And so congratulations. I'm so glad you brought that up because there's a big stigma with that, with people not wanting anyone to know, because like you said, they might look at it as a weakness and instead it's a strength. It's like, I'm having some troubles here and I can be better for myself and others around me, especially those I love and myself for that. So congrats on that. Okay. So now this is a little different kind of question I've never done with anyone.
Okay.
Besides your wisdom, leadership, coaching, and love of sports, you have an interest in politics. And you know how they say I think it's never talk about politics or religion or whatever. Faith is huge for me. So I talk about that. And, we're in a very political year. So I want to play a game with you. What is one thing you would want to make happen if you were CEO of the ATP? And for people who don't know, that's like the Men's Association for Tennis Professionals. That's what they call it now. So say you're CEO and you would want to bring up something that you would like to see happen within men's professional tennis. What would that be?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on that, but quickly, I think, the level of players has gotten consistently higher over, it used to be that, up to the top 50 or top 100. And now it seems like it's, the top 300, maybe even 500. I mean, the difference now between a player ranked 40 or 50 in the world and a player maybe ranked 200 or 250 is much smaller than it used to be. Obviously, you still got the players at the very top that separate themselves. And one of the things that I've always beaten the drum about, and this is a topic that comes up a lot in pro tennis, is how many players should professional tennis support, right? There's a lot of players that are ranked 200 or 250 that can't make a living, basically. So what I've been happy to see, one of the things I've been happy to see that I'd like to see it happen even more, is spreading the prize money out so that it's not so top heavy. And the majors have started to do that more in the last 5-7 years, which I think is a positive. So, you know how it goes, Andrea. You win your first round, you get double the next round, you double the next round. And to me, that's a little too top heavy. I think the top players certainly deserve to make the most money, but most of them will make a lot of that money in endorsements and off the court, and exhibitions and appearance fees, all think that they deserve to get because they're the ones that, for the most part, bring in the fans. But I think I'd like to see tennis go a little bit more towards the golf, where the golf distributes prize money, so that if you're number 70 in the world or 60 in the world as a tennis player, I mean, that's pretty darn good. And I think you should be able to make a really good living doing that. And so I'm happy to see that improve, but I'd like to see it continue to go that direction at the tour level a little bit more. So that's the main thing. I think the other thing that we're seeing in the team events, right? And I put the Olympics as a team event, even though it's still like almost, set up like a regular tournament, is to see, Nadal and Alcaraz and Coco and, all the great singles players, Tommy Paul and Taylor Fritz, they just lost in the semifinals playing doubles. Tennis, we need to expand our tent. We need to get kids more into tennis because it's not just about the individual, which,
Right.
you and I know well. I mean, you dealt with that and the pressure. And I think being able to have the team aspect become a little bit more popular. And I think doubles is a way to do that. So I try to encourage the players to play more doubles. That's always obviously very tricky. But I do think that the team events are great for the sport and great for seeing, players having fun, right? And
Fun,
supporting
what a
each other.
concept.
Imagine
It
that.
can be, it can
Yeah,
happen.
like when I saw the male gymnast, right? The guy with the glasses
Yes.
who did the pommel horse, and that was like he was sitting there like this, and then he comes off, he takes off the glasses, and he does the pommel horse, and he does this like amazing routine to help the men's team get the bronze. They weren't supposed to win the gold, but they win the bronze. And he was so, it gives me like tears because I watched it on the highlight, and I was like, man, this is what it's all about. And he goes over and he hugs a white guy and an Asian guy and a black guy, and they're all a team together. And gymnasts, like tennis players, it's a very individual sport, but to see them have that camaraderie, I feel like we have to find ways in tennis to do that, because that's what kids love. I mean, there's obviously we love the individual aspect of tennis, doing it on our own, but most kids want to be around other kids, and just to see those types of moments happen in swimming, in gymnastics, in fencing, and so on during the Olympic Games, I think tennis could use a little bit more of that.
Absolutely. To comment on a couple of those things, in golf, and many people who are fans of golf know this, in golf, you make no money to show up. Like, you have to make the cut just to get any kind of money in golf. So you have to perform. It's like playing 2 rounds in tennis and then you get prize money. So golf, they have that standard. And the other thing is, I used to play Fed Cup, which is now called the Billie Jean King Cup, which is so cool that they did that, naming it after her. But it's true. It's the team camaraderie is something so special. Like, for people, when athletes skip the Olympics, and they can have any kind of reason, and that's fine. But for me, oh my gosh, like, I would carry someone's water bottles out for the
Right.
Olympics. I remember when I worked with John, when he did that. He did coverage for NBC at the French, and I was just starting the foundation, and I really wanted to try to get some players to maybe help. And I told John, I said, look, John, I'll do anything. I will get your stats. I'll carry your rackets. I'll do whatever. I can be your assistant. And there's something about the passion of sport, and so many people have it. They will do anything to come in. And maybe they can take, instead of 3 out of 5 sets all the time, do 2 out of 3, but say, you know what, you got to play doubles or mix. A lot of tournaments now have women and men together. So that's really cool statements that you made. Okay, so we're moving on to, what about Mayor of New York City? What's that look like for you? What would you want to put forth?
Mayor of New York City. Wow. Well, New York is the ultimate melting pot, and so we grew up, in the suburbs in Queens, although that's still part of New York City, even though it's the suburbs. So that was one of the reasons that John, started this academy, and then started the charitable wing of it to help kids that normally, can't afford it, bottom line, to play tennis. We were lucky enough that our parents could afford it. Times have changed, so it's more difficult. But, equal opportunity, opening it up. I mean, one of the things I love about New York, and my daughters are learning this now, is there's so many things you can do on your own. And, people say to me, oh, I would never go to New York. It's like, it's not safe and all. I'm like, come on. It's like one of the safest places around. I mean, you see the headlines here and there, but New York, to me, you have to embrace and celebrate the diversity of this city, and because it's second to none. It's second to none. There's people from all over the world that come here and that can be successful. So obviously we've got our own problems, like most big cities do, but for the most part, it's the ultimate melting pot. And when you talk about sports, you talk about culture, you talk about the arts, you talk about politics, you talk about the financial world. Everything is here. So I celebrate it. I love it. I was actually talking to someone, I think I was doing another podcast recently, And they were asking me, well, where did you go to train when you were on the tour? I was like, what do you mean? I trained, I went to the bubble under the 59th Street Bridge at six in the morning, because that was when I could get a court from 6 to 8. I used to go out there and grind, for 2 hours, and then all the people would come in to play. Once in a while, I'd go to Florida or California just to on my way to Australia or something like that. But I always, we always called it home. And my parents were very proud New Yorkers. They grew up with not a lot, both of them, and their dream was to sort of make it in New York, which they both did. My mom became very successful she was an emergency room nurse for the early years of their marriage, and my dad became a partner at a big time law firm. And when they got to move into New York City, that was like a huge deal. And I reaped the benefits of it as a sophomore in high school, because until then, me and both my brothers commuted an hour each way from Queens to get to school in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. That's how important it was to our parents. Education number one, mm-hmm. but also like getting to the big city. That was like a big deal to be able to be part of the city, live there. And then when I went to high school the last 3 years, I would walk across the park to go back and forth to school, play soccer on the soccer team in Central Park. Go play in the tennis courts at the Central Park courts. So to me, that's like, New Yorkers are, actually New Yorkers are very kind people. Like I used to go play at the Central Park courts, and all the people would sign up there and they get a park pass to play. And I'd go out there and I'd find someone that could, grind me for 2 hours, a college kid or something like that. And all these, people would stand around. They go, hey, Patrick, you need a hit. This was when I was like 23, 24, like on the tour. And so it's just, if you have the right attitude about it, it's a great place, and it's got everything. So I would continue to celebrate it and try to continue to give up as much opportunity to people, because obviously certain areas get more expensive and they're difficult to be able to live there. So you have to be able to manage that as well. I'm not going to get into taxes or whatever. We don't want to talk about that, but you know what I'm saying. Like you have to make it. It's as great as it is. It can still squeeze out somewhat, some certain people, they move to Brooklyn or they move, to outside the city. So I think you got to find that right balance, but I love it. We're still here. We live just outside the city now, me and my girls. But we're 12, 13 miles from Midtown Manhattan.
Awesome. Okay. So what about if you were leader of a national school board, like the education board? I don't want to overstep, but I would think you would say something like get mental health in all the schools, or get in,
well, for sure. I mean, one of the things that I learned when I started working here at our academy years ago was actually I took this from one of the parenting classes that I took, and basically, and it was a book that my wife and I read, which is basically listen to your kids and acknowledge your mm-hmm. kids. And that's the first thing to do. So I remember there was I was talking to some of the pros here. Most of our pros are young. They're just out of college. They were good tennis players. They're not necessarily like child experts all the time, right? So one of them was having trouble with a few of the kids on a court. They were maybe 6, 7 years old, and one girl was crying. And the coach was, kind of saying like, what you think is the right thing to say. Oh, don't cry. Everything's going to be okay. And so I put my training into practice, and I said, watch this. I said, let me show you something and let's see what happens. So I went over to the girl. She was sitting on the bench. And the first thing I did was I said, how are you doing? And she's not really going to say much to that, right? Which I knew. So I said, you look like you're very upset, which is you're now acknowledging their feelings and their behaviors. And then, all of a sudden, like you could see her eyes change a little bit. And she said, something to the effect of, I'm having a really bad day. And then instead of saying, oh no, it's, great. I said, you're really having a bad day, huh? I said, I can see that. So right away, the child becomes like, you acknowledge them, you acknowledge what their feelings are, as opposed to saying, don't have these, they're taking it, oh, you should be happy, don't cry, tennis players don't cry. you
Mhm.
know, that's basically saying you're not acknowledging what they're feeling. So right away, the girl completely changed her attitude, and you know, she started opening up about whatever it was. She didn't like her lunch or something, you know, at school. And that was very valuable to me to like learn those lessons and then put them into practice. So I always, I love to talk to kids and find out what they're interested in. This is not to say that kids should be the ones deciding what the curriculum is. And by the way, I think this whole, by some in our political world saying, parents should control school boards and control the education. I'm like, I'm not an expert on education. Why should I? We should have input, but we should hire people to do the right thing. So all of a sudden, like, well, this school, they got rid of certain books or whatever, and the parents now decide what books to read or not to. I'm like, I never heard of it. I never heard of that. When we went to school, we trusted the school we went to,
Right.
and we let the professionals do their job. So I
Right.
actually think it's gone too far from certain segments of the population, like, oh, the parents should control the curriculum. Like, really? Like, I'm gonna tell them how to teach calculus to my daughter. I know nothing about it, about
Right.
calculus and so on. So I think you have to put you have to trust in people, but at the same time, I think, like you said, Andrea, mental health, but tie that into encouraging children to speak up, because
Make it
especially
safe. Make it safe to
make
speak
it
up.
safe to say
Yes.
what you think, just
Yeah.
and
Because sometimes when you speak up,
yeah,
for kids, I
it's
mean, I know this
tricky.
firsthand. Yeah, yeah, it's very tricky and it's
Yeah,
100% worse. And so give a safe environment for that to happen. That's helping everyone's mental health as well. Because if you're allowed to speak up and be heard and acknowledge, like you said, I mean, those are really important things. I mean, anyone that's in the environment of minors, business, schools,
yeah.
whatever it is, should have training, first of all. I mean, just
Oh,
have some
absolutely.
training, or
Right,
you shouldn't be allowed to be around a minor. If you haven't passed like CPR and certain tests,
right.
you have to do them annually. It's not like, oh, you learn it once and you're good. It's evolving. And you know this from having kids. I know this from being around kids. Kids teach every single day. Kids will
Yeah,
teach you
totally.
every
Yep.
single day. And so pay attention to that, because you'll be a better person for it. But by golly, do your own. So you're only around a minor when you're equipped to make sure they're in a safe environment and allow them that. So great sharing.
Hallelujah is what I say to that. Well
Yeah,
said. Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so the last one on this section is Central Park is world renowned too. It's very special, but the rest of the world doesn't have necessarily a lot of protective situations. Nature's having a tough time. And so if you were in that political position where you could do something about the environment and nature, what would be one thing you would say, got to get this on the docket? This has to get stamped somewhere and help out nature and the
Well,
environment.
everywhere I go, I try to, find the park and walk and find a hike. I love hiking. So, everywhere I go, I try to do that. So there's certain cities that you can see have made the effort to do that. And I think that pays off in a huge way for on a lot of levels, mental health being at the top of the list, but the beauty of nature. And, so that's one of the things. Even when I was playing on the tour, I used to go around and just really walk around the cities that I went to. So there's no doubt it plays a huge part in not only the beauty of the city, and obviously New York City has got more concrete than any city on the planet basically. But to have those areas, Riverside Park is beautiful. By the way, there's red clay courts. Did you know that in Riverside
I
Park?
heard, I heard. I was like,
Beautiful red,
yes.
beautiful red clay courts, and then I drive up the Henry Hudson Parkway, the West Side Highway, which is in the city, to get out of the city, and I pick up my daughters at dance school, and we always drive up the West Side Highway, and it's very interesting. You drive up, and you go by Riverside Park, which is another beautiful park along the river with the tennis courts and places to walk. So even when I'm waiting to my daughters, I got to wait in the city to pick them up. I'll go to the park. I'll find a place to park and I'll just go to the park for an hour to walk. But anyway, when I'm driving up now, you drive along, the one side's a river, there's a path to walk, and the other side is a lot of like some playing fields and there's like a volleyball area. I noticed yesterday they have places where the like the rings for the gymnasts. So I actually saw a girl doing the rings. I'm thinking she must have just watched the Olympics, right? Because she's trying to do. And then there's a whole area for volleyball. There's basketball, and then you know what the new thing is now. You probably know where I'm going with the new thing, and it's crowded all the time. The pickleball courts.
Of course, yes.
They transformed this one area that I think we're maybe, that we have a lot of handball. A lot of guys play handball. And I used to actually go to local parks in New York, and I used to go with just to hit the tennis ball. So I'd find a wall that had enough space where I could actually hit. And a lot of the guys who were playing handball, and they're like serious handball players, they'd come over and they'd start watching me, and they'd go, "Man, like, you're pretty good. You're pretty good." But anyway, the pickleball courts, I mean, in the winter, I'm coming back. It's, if it's not snowing, there's people out there. This week, I've been driving back and forth, brutally hot. Luckily, they're shaded. There's a bunch of trees over there.
Again, the trees. Thank you to nature.
The trees, exactly. They're always crowded. So, obviously, the more nature, the better. And, we all know that commerce has to happen, and things have to move forward. But having that balance, particularly in a big city, is absolutely crucial. London is one of my favorite cities. Paris, I love going there because they have such amazing parks.
Have you been to Japan with forest bathing there? They actually have their hospitals and doctors prescribe forest bathing, which is they have special forests that are for people because it's so helpful and beneficial to their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, and it helps them heal faster as well. So
I believe it. All that fresh air is good for you.
Yeah. Okay. So now we go back as far as when we were kids at the U.S. Open. I hung out at your booth when you sold U.S. Open programs while I was playing in the Open,
selling T-shirts and programs. Yeah.
Yeah, you sure did. And you had a kind and fun personality even then, when you were very competitive in sports as well. Your brother, John, I'm forever grateful to, as he was the first donor to my Children's Cancer Foundation. His amazing efforts and our friendship goes back many decades. And both your parents were Irish tough, super solid humanitarians, loyal, hardworking, incredible people. Same for all the McEnroe boys. So there's so many things that qualify people that as you grow older and you stay with that, some people have things happen and they switch your personalities, hardship happens and they change. You've always stayed the same, which is, same, but evolving in even better ways, which is so great to see. And there's certainly a lot to talk about in sports. We're going to get back to that in a second about the US Open and a few more on the Olympics. But before we get to that, I want to invite Adriana to join with her questions. Adriana grew up on foreign soil with very few advantages many receive in a state or country-sponsored sports program that we see now. Still, Adriana became a Division I college athlete, double major college graduate, and former WTA Tour player. And she now helps disadvantaged children full-time. And don't get her on a motorcycle track course because we'll just be waving to her. She'll be so fast. So anyway, here's Adriana.
Hi, Patrick. It is wonderful to be on the podcast with you. Thank you for being with us.
It's great to see you, and thank you for being on.
Likewise. Andrea has spoken so highly of you and your entire family. You have fans worldwide for your tennis and even more so for your special personality.
Thank you.
Even listening to these conversations and seeing you and Andrea and following you and listening to your podcast, you seem gifted with an inner calm demeanor. Is that a gift you were born with, or did you train to have that type of inner peace demeanor?
That's a great question. First of all, let me just say that Andrea is very kind, and she's also very humble. Okay, because when I was out there at the U.S. Open, I was playing the juniors, and she was like in the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open in the seniors. Okay, as a teenager. And she would go play on center court or the big court, and then she'd finish her match, and she just wanted to be like with another kid, like, with me. She wanted, because that was something she craved, right? That maybe she didn't have the opportunity to do as much because she was so amazing at tennis. So she's being extremely humble in saying that, I was such a great she was playing in the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open and then coming out. But to your point, thank you for your kind words. I think that it was a little bit being the youngest brother. I have John, obviously. I have my other brother, Mark, who's in the middle. I was always like sort of the baby of the family. So my mom was probably a little tougher on John, when he was growing up. And then by the time she got to me, it was a little different, I think, dynamic. So I think that was partly why John was so driven. My mom drove my dad. And when my dad came home from when they got married in their early 20s, they lived in some crappy apartment in Flushing, Queens. And my dad used to go to work all day, and my mom used to work as well at the hospital, and he would go to law school at night. My dad would go to work, and they had John. John was born on the Air Force base in Germany. So anyway, when my dad came home after his first or second year of law school, and he said, my mom's name was Kay. He said, Kay, I finished number 2 in my class. She said, who finished 1? Like that was, so we always told that story when it came a little bit to John getting to number 1. But anyway, being the youngest, I think I saw, because I had 2 older brothers, I kind of took a lot of things in when I was young. And then when John became super famous, obviously I was quite young. I was 10 or 11 at the time when he made the semis of Wimbledon as a 17-year-old. So all of a sudden, his life totally changed. And our lives as a family changed a little bit because, there was press coming to our house, and, we were not John was just a great junior tennis player. And the next thing you know, he's in the semis of Wimbledon. So everything changed then. And then I think over time, like playing junior tennis that both of you did, I was a pretty successful junior player. But I had a little bit of a temper. I would say I was a little bit of a brat, as a kid. And as I got a little bit older, 13, 14, John was then, very famous and getting a lot of attention for his behavior and his attitude and so on. So we'd have family get-togethers when John would come home, and my dad would say, John, why do you do this? And John was like, well, maybe that's part of the reason, because my dad was pretty intense. But my dad used to always say to me, Patrick, don't get involved in this. You don't want to be, look what your brother's dealing with. You don't want to have to deal with that. People are going to be watching you, which was true. And so that was sort of difficult. I remember playing in the 16s nationals one summer in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. And we stayed at the dorms at Vanderbilt. And I was there by myself. I think I was with a friend, one of my buddies, and his coach, because I used to really travel a lot on my own by the time I got to be like 14, 15. So I was playing in like a round of 16 or quarterfinal match, and I was winning pretty comfortably, 6-2, 5-2. And the other guy started coming back. And early in the second set, some photographer came out on the court, like a professional photographer with all the equipment and so on. So they're sitting on the side and they're not taking any pictures. I'm like, this is weird. Like, why are they out here? So the other guy starts coming back, 5-3, 5-4. I lose the game for 5-all. I take my racket, and of course, then I hear the camera go off. So then I was like, oh, okay, now I kind of know what's going on. So they started taking the pictures. When I made a face, I heard the camera go. So I end up, winning the match in a tiebreak that set. Next morning, I'm at the dorms, getting ready for my quarterfinal match. I open up the local paper, the Tennessean, which is the huge newspaper in Nashville, and there wasn't a lot going on in the summertime there, right, in sports, right? And the headline was oh brother, and it had a picture of me like throwing the banging the racket or something like that. So that sort of had an effect on me as a young kid, just for my behavior, meaning on court. But I always just, quite honestly, love people. I love being around people. John is a little more, I think partly because he was shy as a kid anyway. But then when he got thrust into the spotlight, I think that kind of forced him to like, well, wait a second, be a little more reserved. Whereas I was a little bit more the opposite, more of a, out and about people person. John's obviously evolved over the years, and, we worked together at the academy and on television, and, our relationship is amazing. But I think just being the younger brother and also kind of being in the shadow, if you want, of what John was going through, and also realizing that when I got into broadcasting, when I got the opportunity, Obviously, part of why I got the opportunity was because of my last name. I'm not that dumb. I can figure that out. But I also realized that I was pretty good at it right away. I had been used to answering questions for many years about John or about myself because I was sort of somewhat known, even though I wasn't not a successful professional tennis player. So I kind of got used to being in that position. And then I realized, very early on in my professional career, that just be outgoing, be out front. I enjoy it. So I've always say yes to things. When I was first starting out in the business, anything that people would ask me to do as far as career wise, I would always do it. And I think that's been part of why I've been able to kind of be part of the USCA for a while, be the Davis Cup captain, work at the academy, work on CNN or different news stations. I like to put myself in uncomfortable environments sometimes, like talking politics or talking culture, talking things that aren't necessarily like right in my wheelhouse. I mean, I can talk tennis in my sleep, but it's very challenging sometimes to go on and talk for 3 minutes about, some other issue. And I think, I was actually texting my wife. I was supposed to be on a CNN political show this week. And then 4 hours before they canceled it, they canceled me being on it, which is very common. And so I texted my wife. She was off recording her record. And I said, "Oh, I'm home," because we were texting about the girls, what they were doing. And I said, "Oh, don't worry. I'm going to be home tonight because they just canceled me." And CNN just canceled. Oh, she said, "Oh, good. Well, you learned something." Because she knew I'd spent like 3 hours like studying the topics of whatever, Trump or Kamala Harris or, whatever the issues were going to be in the night. So I enjoy that. And I've managed to kind of make that part of my career as well, like politics. I studied political science at Stanford, which I loved. So I've always had an interest in that. And just to find ways to participate, I think is, as a citizen, I enjoy doing.
Thank you so much for sharing. So this is so amazing and so important for others, I think, to hear. I mean, regardless of what your background, it's always ever evolving, and even whatever name you have, you still have to be able to provide the information, be informed and educated about the topic, and present it in a way. And it's so great.
I was on Tennis Channel yesterday. They have this new show that they're sort of it's almost like you ever seen the Manning cast for football when they're kind of talking?
Yeah.
So it's like a different so they were doing that. They asked me to come on. I talked about the International Tennis Hall of Fame, which I'm now the president of, which is a whole nother story, which is awesome. But one of the things I said, because these are all young kind of guys just off the tour, starting out in trying to get into broadcasting. And one of the things I said to them, after my 28 years now being in this business, and this is also related, I think, to what we discussed earlier about kids. I said, one of the most underrated traits for a broadcaster is to listen. Listen to what other people are saying, engage with other people. Don't just come in like, with your agenda, what you want to say. That's important too. But you have to also like react to what other people are saying and be interested and not be fake, and I'm genuinely very interested. I mean, I'm interested, Adriana. So what is this that you like to go around the track? So you're like a racer now? What do you do?
Yes, yeah, it's a hobby. It's but yeah, around the track, and then you time yourself, so if you can get better a little bit faster.
Is this running or biking or
No,
what are you
this is
doing?
on a motorcycle. Like
On a
Keanu Reeves.
motorcycle?
Yeah, Keanu Reeves is in that group too sometimes when
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay, just for any audience member, she's the only one at the foundation that does that. I'm always on the ground. Like I don't do
That's
the
awesome.
skiing or horseback riding or
Wow.
anything like
It's
that.
like a meditation to me. I'm fascinated by the machine and how it can do what it can do at such speeds. And it's not so much about going fast, but the ability to do, I'm a fairly light person and petite, and I can still do things that
That the
others
men
can
do,
do
that the men do. Yeah.
That's
So
amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. You got to I'll send you one of her pictures.
Send
I
me, yeah,
basically,
send me a video. I want to see the
yeah, I
video.
never watch the videos. I basically
Oh.
just say, okay, here's the dates of all the
It's too
programs that,
scary. You guys got a great thing going, and I just so admired both of you, and obviously you, Andrea, for all the years you've been doing this, and your passion is like second to none, and it's just incredible. So every time I see you and get to talk to you, it's an absolute treat. Are you coming to New York for the Open this year?
I am. It's one of my little last parts. Do you have a few more minutes for us to talk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Of
okay,
course.
cool. I think Adriana, you have another question, right?
I have one more question. I really, really,
And then
yeah,
I
would like to
finish up
ask.
with the US Open.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so even before you were married to your wife, who is a singer and actress, among many other amazing things, and had 3 daughters you cheered on, you were and are incredibly respectful of women in sports, women on Broadway, women in every kind of leadership position, and life in general. It is great to see. How did you learn that respect, and why is that important for you to live privately and publicly with this important quality?
I always wanted to have a little sister when I was growing up. I had this thing. I always, I had 2 older brothers, right? And it was very much a male, household. And for some reason, I always wanted a little sister. I don't know why. It was just some part of me that wanted that. And so when I had daughters, and then I had 2 more daughters, twins. I was like, wow, I guess, I don't have sisters, but now I've got 3 daughters. So, I don't know. It's just to me, it's just it's just right. I mean, women. I mean, we're all just here. I mean, we're just people here. So, I have huge respect for what they do, for what we all do, and this whole stuff. I mean, I do really hope that we have a woman president, without going into the politics, just generally speaking. I see so many leaders in so many other countries that are women. And I kind of scratch my head. I think I know the answer why, but I'm not going to go into it, why we haven't in this country, but I hope it's going to happen, because I just think it's a great message. So I love I've always, my wife we met, by the way, in grade school. We met when we were little kids.
Oh, that's
So even before
amazing.
I knew Andrea, her brother was my best friend all through grade school, and she was like the younger sister. So our family kind of stayed friends over the years. And when we re-met was, she had started on Broadway and had her own very successful career. I've been playing on the tour, and we knew nothing about what each other did, but we did know that we were both somewhat successful at a fairly young age. And then we learned about what each other does and still does. She still kind of makes fun of me of saying, like, you don't know anything about, because I always watch her sing, and she's like, what'd you think? I said, I think it was freaking great. I mean, you're unbelievable. She's like, oh no, you didn't give me. I said, what do you? That's what I'm telling you. That's what I think. 2 of my daughters are big dancers now. One of them's a really expert ballet dancer. So I go to see her performance. I just went and picked her up in North Carolina this weekend. She finished 5 weeks at the Carolina School of Ballet for the summer program. So I went to watch her perform, and then and I said, Diana, I said, God, you've really improved. I don't know the details of it. I know tennis. With my older daughter was pretty good tennis player. So that in some ways that was harder for me, because I was watching her play tennis, and I'm like, how could you miss that shot? But when I watch dance, I just have a different. So I actually learned from that. I was like, you got to stay out of the analyzing her tennis game. Just let it be. Let her do her thing. But I said to Diana, my dancer daughter, I said, Diana, you're really doing great. She goes, well, Dad, you always say that. Well, I mean it. It's kind of like my wife saying it to me about her performance. I said, I guess I don't know the nuances, but I just support, what they all do. When my wife and I got married, I knew that she was going to be someone that she was going to be very into her career and want to keep doing what she's doing. Obviously, when the girls were younger, it was harder for her to travel as much. But now that they're a little older, she's on the road more. She can go and do her thing, and which is great. So I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it's always been, beautiful, because, she wants to do what she does. And, sometimes being home with the girls while I'm in Australia for 2.5 weeks, not the easiest in the world when you have 3 very young girls. all at the same, same age. But as time has gone on, she's been able to get back more and more into what she loves to do, which is one of the reasons I married her, because I knew that that was her personality, that she wasn't someone that, wanted to stop her own career. Obviously, many women want to just be home and, raise their kids and do that. That's cool too. It's just like whatever you want to do. So we've had a good balance of making it work, and supporting each other. She supports me a ton. When I first became the Davis Cup captain, actually, when I was auditioning, I call it auditioning to be the captain. I had the USGA president at the time I had to write like a 6-page paper about why I would be a good captain. And my wife, who's brilliant, and she's actually become a very successful writer in the last 10 years at the New York Times, kind of helped me craft it and put my thoughts down on paper. She's a lot better at that than I am. So we've helped each other, I think, a lot over the years in doing that. And it's why we're still alive and kicking. And, why we say having daughters is the greatest. Having girls is great. The oldest one is on her way to Duke in a couple of weeks to start her college career. We'll be on the tennis team there, which is awesome. But she wanted to go someplace where she wasn't recruited for tennis, because there were some smaller tennis schools that recruited her, and she just wanted to be a student first and play tennis as well, but not have that be her focus. So people are asking, "Oh, are you going to be okay? Your daughter's leaving for college." I'm like, of course I'm okay. Like this is what she wants to do. She's like so excited. So I guess I'll shed a tear or two at some point when I go up to her room and she's not there. But, to me, it's about empowering people, right? And it's not about me. It's about them and what they want to do. And one of my other girls came back from France. She took a 1-month trip, helping the community in France. It was like an immersion program, learning French, hiking in the Alps. And she came back and she's like, "Dad, I had the best time. I miss it so much." And I'm like, that's what it's all about. It's like, I don't want my girls to just say, "Oh, I just want us to be home." They, live their life. My mom was similar like that. When I graduated from college, I came back to her. It was a relatively small apartment. I was talking about when we moved into the city, and she had transformed my little room into her office. So I'm like, "Mom, what happened to my room?" She's like, "No, son, you're out of here. Like, you're on your own now. You graduated from college. Let's go, go. You're making money playing tennis. Find your own apartment." So again, we're doing the same thing with my kids, I think, is why I feel important to empower anybody, whether they're boys or girls.
Oh, thank you so much. That's amazing. We are all equals after all, and
Of
it
course,
makes such a big difference when we treat each other that way and include everyone, in their life and whatever they want to do and
100%.
support them. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh, this is
Go
so
ahead,
great.
Andrea.
Okay, so Patrick, you and I are close in age, and like my sister, you graduated from prestigious Stanford University. And so we have 3 college graduates here, 2 from Division I schools. I'm from a small and wonderful theology and ministry school program, and I also studied zoology in Gainesville at a terrific school called Santa Fe Community College. And we were talking about a little bit about your commentary, and you've done ESPN and CNN and a lot of and other networks as well. And
Right.
so you could talk about any sport, any issue in life, any politics. You're very versed. You could run a whole CNN program if you wanted to in any subject. But because the US Open is upcoming, what are your picks? I know this is hard because there's injuries, the Olympics, it's a different year because there's Olympics in there. And
Right.
so a lot of players are, having a harder schedule. But do you have any picks for the men's and women's champions?
Well, I'm just going to slide my phone. Alcaraz is the favorite. I mean, this is amazing what I've watched over the last 2 years. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. And, I predicted, which, surprised everyone, that, that at Wimbledon, I said he's going to destroy Djokovic in the final. And he basically did. I mean,
Right.
it should have been 2-2 and 3 or 4. He got a little bit rattled, at that last game trying to close it out. So it went to a tiebreak. But I mean, when you watch this guy up close, and I remember actually being courtside a couple of years ago when they were still teenagers, Alcaraz and Sinner. and they played on center court in a night match. And I was doing the match courtside for ESPN. And I was like, these guys are taking the game to another level. Like, there was obviously amazing, and I'm talking about the tempo of the tennis. The tempo of every point was like, you could see Federer and Nadal do these kind of points, once every 4 or 5 points. These guys were doing it like every other point, like side to side. Not to say that they're better than those guys, but the tempo of the tennis to me changed when I watched that particular match. And obviously now it's about how they evolve the game and how they get better in the forecourt and their serving and all that. Alcaraz has it all. I mean, the guy can do it all. Unbelievably explosive. Can play every shot. So to me, he's the favorite in pretty much any tournament he plays now. I mean, Sinner, you got to put up there as well.
Right.
He didn't play the Olympics because of tonsillitis, but he won his first major this year. I predicted at the beginning of the year, what shocked a lot of people, that Djokovic wouldn't win another major, okay, because of what I was starting to see happen. And it's sort of inevitable, right? I mean, the guy is 37. He's still human, even though what he's been doing, particularly in his 30s, is superhuman. The amount of majors he's won in his 30s is crazy. So could he still win one? Of course he could. He's Novak Djokovic. But I don't believe that he's going to, because I think the younger guys are so good. Zverev has played his way back to where he's a threat, particularly on a hard court.
They are amazing. What about women? What about the women?
Women is a little more,
tougher to pick. There's a lot of golf. Gosh, we won. The U.S. Olympic team was amazing. We had an amazing U.S. Olympic team for tennis. Fabulous on and off court. But I still think that Coco rises in New York at the Open. I mean, she has before.
Well, I think it's going to be a lot of. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on her. I mean, obviously, because she's got a lot of points to defend, not only at the Open, but she won. Remember last year, she won Washington, and then she won Cincy as well. So
and it's tough to walk away from the Olympics having lost, in all 3 categories. And the depth in women's tennis has grown like enormously. It was starting to look like, there was like that 3 or 4 that were separating themselves. Obviously, Iga at the top, on clay, Sabalenka, but then she missed Wimbledon, which she could have won. Rybakina, who's very solid and has won Wimbledon finals, Australia. So it looked like those 3, 4, and then Coco, made that move to get to 2. I don't feel personally myself that right now Coco's like number 2 in the world. I don't think she's playing quite at that level. No.
I think she's in the mix.
She can. She can move herself into it. Navarro, Pegula. I mean, there's such great depth. Okay, so because of time-wise, we love all you U.S. players, but we're going to move on to some other attendees at the U.S. Open this year, which is going to be children with cancer.
Very nice.
So I'm especially excited about the U.S. Open because my Little Star Foundation will be hosting children with cancer and their families. We're staying at a New York City hotel, and then this part, it's a story. It's not a super long story, but it's a story. So everyone be patient and listen, because there's a special kind of, not a twist tribute to Patrick in this, but a little bit of one. So what it is Stacey Ellister, who you know well, Patrick.
Yep.
She's the U.S. Open tournament director and the USTA CEO of professional tennis. She's providing a complimentary suite for our kids at the U.S. Open Kids Day, for Arthur Ashe Kids Day. And we talked, Billie Jean King has earned so much of the rights of having women's sports be where it is today. Arthur Ashe has done a lot for that as well, and he's passed on. And I think a lot of times he gets forgotten in some things, but he has done such enormous good works. And so we're really excited to be there on Arthur Ashe Kids Day. And we're going to have also FAO Schwartz, the famous FAO Schwartz.
Yes, sure.
They're going to open their doors early. So our kids, because we're going to have 40 in that group, and many of them are wheelchair bound. So they're going to open their doors early for us. So we get to do a really cool shopping spree for them. But when I was bringing up this story and why I wanted to mention it is I remember when you and John were growing up playing at Port Washington Tennis Academy, and we had junior tournaments there together. And so often kids that I'm around and this group that will be in New York City, and they're their ages are 8 to 15. Some of them,
Mhm.
there's a couple that are a little younger. One boy lost his leg to cancer, and
Mm.
all the kids attending the US Open program, they all love tennis. They all, like you and me and Adriana and John and Mark, your brother too, my sister, they all grew up like loving tennis, and their life shifted so dramatically with a diagnosis with cancer. And so the part of the story is at Wimbledon, staff at Wimbledon are there. They've been there since before I was even a kid playing pro tournaments there. And the same is at the US Open. And so Anne-Marie Martin, which you may know, Patrick.
Know her very well.
Yes.
Yeah, she was my right-hand person when I was Davis Cup captain for 10 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she's amazing. Roy heads up the transportation, and they've known me since I was 2 in the world at age 16. And when I turned pro at 14. And so Stacy, Anne-Marie, and Roy, they all have already reached out to me. And this is kind of a little unusual. And the reason I'm bringing up this story is like, you know, when Olympians get on the podium or they finish a race and they're so excited and they just start like it's just overwhelming and they don't know what to say.
Right.
I've never really had that in tennis when I've accomplished something, because I guess maybe it was easy for me. So I was like,
Right.
oh, you know, and I knew when I was going to win or when I was going to lose. So it's a different thing. But even talking about this story, it's like a full circle for me, because when they reached out, and the WTA is helping us with this program too, it's very special for me, because I've always loved playing pro tennis and helping kids. I did it since I was 14. I did both together for reasons
Right.
not important to go into. I ended up only being able to do one.
Right.
And so I just did kids.
We know that story. I know that story.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's and when you see people put in their sweat and their efforts, and every single day, I mean, these Olympians are every single day, week after week, year after year, and some of them never get anywhere. They go back to their jobs, and that was their one moment. And so it's like for me, I look at these kids and it's like, we have a chance to make their day. They don't know if they're going to get their next birthday. They don't know if they're going to get their next day or week. And we have a chance to change their lives for the better and to help these families. And so I get it that it's my calling, and I'm happy, like, Adriana is like the kind of the right hand as well on with the vice president at the foundation. And I'm happy when everyone else has their hobbies and their passions. My passion is this, Little Star, helping these kids and making a difference. And so when someone helps, that grabs at my heart, like so grateful and so thankful. And so to have these people coming for full circle around to say, we're excited to see you, Andrea. We're excited you're here, means a lot. And the reason I bring this up is Kelly Clarkson, when Celine Dion sang at the opening ceremonies, they asked Kelly Clarkson what she thought. She couldn't speak. She was teary-eyed because she was so overwhelmed by that. And some people said, why would you be, that's what your job is. Your job is to do this. And I kind of get that. It's because I'm just talking to you about this story. And for me, anyone who does a kindness towards me and the efforts that I'm doing at Little Star Foundation mean a lot, because I know how important it is to these families, right? So the reason I'm bringing this up is about 8 years ago, I ran into you at a tournament. I've always run programs for kids with cancer at tournaments for our 40th years next year. So for 39 years, I've done that, because those communities welcomed me as a kid. They didn't know who I was. And I came to their city. I played pro tennis. They cheered me on. They cheered on women's tennis. They supported women's tennis. And so for me to give back to those kids in those cities means a lot. And I've been doing that for all these years. But you saw me at a tournament and I was only helping kids, and you're like, why aren't you playing in the Legends? And I said, well, I've done that. And, I help, my foundation's open, 365 days a year. And I'm busy. And you just kind of looked at me, and you knew my love for tennis. And you said to me, and that's why it was really important when Adriana asked you that question about you go to lengths to help people, that's just natural for you. I wasn't going to do anything for your career. Your brother John did help pay the way for a lot of commentators to be able to get into tennis, because John put a lot of tennis on the map, like Billie Jean King did. And so I wasn't going to do anything to help your career. I wasn't going to do anything to help you in anything. And yet you sat there and knew how much I love tennis and said, you know what, you should come. We want you to come play.
Right.
And you said, Wimbledon does it right. And you can come. Not that the other Grand Slams didn't, but Wimbledon was the next Grand Slam that was coming up. But Wimbledon does do it a whole other level for sure. But you said that to me and said, Andrea, and you stopped. You had to go somewhere, but you stopped and spent 5 minutes going, look, you know, we miss you here, and you should be back here, and you've helped women's tennis, and come play. It's fun. And I remember, because Adriana and I were at that time helping kids in a tournament, and
Of course you were. Right.
I wasn't able
Right.
to play in that tournament, but we were there making
Yeah.
sure kids had fun. And I went back to my hotel room and I didn't even know how to contact, you know, Wimbledon or the Grand Slam or anything. And I only for kids, not for tennis. And I contacted
Right.
Wimbledon and said, I'd really be interested in playing your Legends event. If you'd ever consider me, it would be an honor. And they replied. And they said, we'd love to have you. And so Adriana and I went several times this last decade, and we've been helping children with cancer, blind children, disadvantaged children, children in wheelchairs, having the time of their life. All of those 2 weeks at Wimbledon while I got to play. So it was like this full circle that those kids would have, because I donated my prize money to the program. So I wanted to be able to go to Wimbledon easily, you know, because it's like, you can't take that money. The passes are way better when you're a player. Let me tell you, it's hard to get anyone in unless you're a player. Just forget it. And so that was something that I didn't know if we were going to have time to get the story in. And I thought I wanted the audience to know all these amazing other great things about you. And we only touched on those for a little bit, but that was something that, you know, I saw what my sister went through being in the shadow of my tennis. You know, your kid's sister's 2 in the world at 16. I mean, don't you think every question that's coming at you is about her? And with you, with John, that was on the same level, but you always, I mean, there was something about you where you were fierce as a competitor. You were awesome as a competitor. So was my sister. You graduated Stanford, but you went on and you just love making the world a better and brighter place. And to say that number ones don't do that, number ones do that, but they do it with a spotlight on them. So very rarely do you get to see everybody else who's doing it that isn't number one in the world. And so that's what's forgotten. The other ones who are doing that have these qualities of extraordinariness, and that's something to be, and that's why you've become captain and coaches and, you know, had these leadership abilities. You're on CNN and you're on ESPN because people recognize that in you. Maybe your brother helped you get in the door, but by golly, no one stays in the room or stays on a job or a career unless they know that they have some kind of extraordinary ability themselves and a kindness about it. And so that's the other reason why when Julia said, be strong, but kind, you know, that the audience member who mentioned that, who's actually a friend, I thought that's such a great way of putting it. Cause so often people are saying, be strong, or be kind. It's like, how do you do both? How do you play pro tennis and do kids? I wanted to do that. And you exemplify that. And so that's why I wanted to come back around. And so we're still not done, because what I wanted to do is ask you a few questions or just a few word answers.
Wait, hold on a second. You can't ask me any question now, okay? Because you know, I'm going through, my listening abilities have been tested, okay? Because there are multiple things I need to mention based on what you just said, okay? And so they may not be in the right order, but I'm going to go through a few things, okay? Number one, there's a reason why the USTA said yes to you, okay? And that's because of who you are and what you've done for so many years. Not because you were number 2 in the world, because of what you've done for 40 years with these kids, okay? Selfless, putting yourself, not putting yourself at the front of it, but putting the kids and their struggles as number one, okay? And trust me when I tell you this, the US Open has become big business, as you know, and to get them to do something like this is a big deal. Okay. And that's a testament to you and all you've done. The other thing I will say is that when I listen to you and remember that story of when you and I spoke, it's okay, Andrea. Okay, I'm going to tell you this right now. It's okay to do something for yourself once in a while. You're selfless, but it's also okay to take care of yourself sometimes. And I get emotional too, because I think of my friend Tim Siegel, who lost his son in a horrible accident. He was a tennis coach, he was a tennis player, and he has a couple of kids, and one of them was his son, who was really into baseball and tennis, and he got into a terrible golf cart accident and was paralyzed. And he lived for about 6-7 years paralyzed, was in a chair. You can look him up, Luke Siegel. Tim Siegel was the coach. And, Tim and I knew him from the tour. He played doubles on the tour. And because of the connection that, he had just retired from being the head coach at one of the big Texas schools. And literally, as he was like driving home, he got the news about his son. And so he dedicated his life, and his son passed away about a year ago from complications. He was in a wheelchair. He was completely paralyzed. But I remember saying to him at one point, we did a couple of podcasts. He came on mine and I went on his. And I said to him, Tim, you need to get back and play tennis. And he said, I can't do it, And so I heard from him recently that he got back on the court, with, I think it was one of his daughters. And obviously that's, very intense, emotional, but it reminds me of you, because you, in your own way, have, put yourself in the background, but it's okay to do things for yourself too, because that's an important part of who we are. And I think
that was never my problem.
going back to our prior discussions about education and so on, right? That's another message that we need to give to people. So you're going to be in New York. Okay, so let me wrap this up, and we could get to whatever else you want to ask me.
Yes, I'm going to be, I'll be there Kids Day Saturday, which I know you have, you're in John's event, I think is on Saturday,
Right.
that Adriana and I played
It's
once
Saturday,
in the
yeah.
Hamptons.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Saturday. We'll be there daytime Saturday, and then I'm also bringing a family on Monday as well.
Good.
So I'll be there.
Okay,
So
let's
find you there.
let's make sure we see you there, and you should bring up the family to ESPN, and we'll give them a little tour or something like that.
Okay, cool. And so
Okay.
this is how I wanted to end this, and just so you know, like, and I know, like, people, when you do things for others, this happens a lot with caregivers, they get burnt out because they're doing too much for others. For whatever reason, God just had me born with loving, helping kids, and that's like kind of my breath. But it was the combination of tennis with it. So when it was like a situation where I was encountered where one or the other had to be chosen, it was always the kids were going to come first, because that's just my bigger heartbeat. But it's cool and fun to do both. So to have this kind of reunion sport, I feel like I am 14 again, going to the Open, so excited, like, oh my gosh, this is where I live, this is where I grew up, and all these people I know. And
Right.
so this is what I want to give to the audience too, is like to kind of have a pocket Patrick. Okay, so on these questions, when someone's struggling, they can think, okay, I can just pull Patrick out of my pocket with this wisdom, and it will help me. So I'm going to ask you to finish these sentences, okay? And then when someone's struggling, they can go, okay, oh yeah, I remember, Pocket Patrick is here for me, and they pull out your answer.
I like that. Okay.
So,
why didn't I think of this? Right.
Okay. So what is the best medicine for you when you are in a challenging situation? Best medicine.
Slow down. Take a couple deep breaths, slow down, take a walk. I always, when I don't feel well and I'm like, oh, I don't really have I'm not in the mood to exercise, or, I'm just a little fried, take a walk by yourself. Don't put in, I got my headphones here, that if I want to go, listen to some music or go on the treadmill or whatever, But, sometimes I tell my daughters this all the time, like, be with yourself, be with your own thoughts, breathe in a little bit, relax.
That's a
Air
great,
is good,
yeah, that's a great one.
So Pocket Patrick says, take a few deep breaths and chill out.
That's perfect. I know Adriana's would be to get on the track, which is, like be you. You said that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Patrick, be
Yeah,
you.
be you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's the second one from Pocket Patrick. You learned kindness from.
I learned kindness from
See, if someone else is struggling,
Yeah.
like this doesn't come easy to me. I'm not. This doesn't come easy, but I want to be kinder to myself.
I
and
mean,
others.
yeah, I mean, I just love people. I just like I
From
mean, to me,
everybody.
it's like, yeah, I like to talk to people. So I can't say like I learned it from somewhere. I just like you have this cause to help these kids. I like to make people feel good, about who they are. Roger Federer to me is a great example of an all-time great who, every time you see him, he doesn't make it about himself.
Same with Rafa. Same with Rafa.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Carlos.
Yeah, just
Alcaraz.
just individuals that are about, hey, like, what are you doing? Or, people like that's a great quality to have, is to ask people, what's going on in their life, how's their family, anything like that. I think that's, to me, being interested in other people.
Okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
so Pocket Patrick, favorite celebratory meal.
I love a really good pizza. I mean, I'm a New
That's
York guy,
great.
and so I
Right.
love a good crispy pizza. So I'm that's like ice cream. I'm a big ice cream guy. I love ice cream. So not easy at this age, to have that be your go-to, because I need to, I can't quite eat like I used to. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes I still do. But that would be my favorite. I love Italian. I mean, I really love food, which is partly why it's just hard for me to, like, I'm trying to lose my little bit of, gut here. And I keep pretty active, but it's not easy. But I love a good meal. I really do. And I also find it, love doing, that's part of what I love about traveling, finding places to go, local places. I love that, meeting people from that part, wherever I am. I find it very social, eating.
Yep. Okay. Pocket Patrick, great unexpected words of advice a person gave you. Unexpected words of advice.
I don't know if it was unexpected, but when you mentioned being the captain of Davis Cup and being a coach, and when I got the job to be the Davis Cup captain, one of the people I called was Dick Gould, who was my longtime coach at Stanford.
Great guy.
Yep, and he was tremendous coach. And so I called him. I said, what can you tell me? What can you give me advice? He says, well, tennis is such an individual sport, and all you guys come in, when you come to Stanford, you're, number one in the country or number two in the country, and then everybody's got to kind of get along. And now you're doing that at a whole nother level in the pros. He said, so treat everybody fairly, but not necessarily the same, which I thought was great advice, because again, it goes back to my personality of, like, talking to the players, finding out what makes them tick. It's like going out now, as I'm going to go out and walk around at the academy. Yes, we have them do all drills and work on, the inside out forehand, but you got to find out what makes the individual tick, right? And I say to our coaches here all the time, tennis is and life, it's about, like, your personality. So certain kids have a personality. They get upset, and, you see their passion. And it's like, you don't want to squash that. You don't want to just, a lot of times these coaches are like, sit down, you're not behaving well. I'm like, hold on a second. Like, obviously you can't throw your racket, and there's certain things you can't do, but, you gotta work with people, and you got to listen to people. So I think that advice that Dick Gould gave me, I can't say I was surprised about it, because I knew that, he would have some good advice. That's why I called him. But it gave me a good perspective going into, working with Andy Roddick and the Bryan brothers, even Agassi and Sampras, which still played a little bit. They were towards the end of their careers. You know, you gotta listen to these players just like you have to listen to kids.
That's really good. That's Pocket Patrick with a carry-on bag.
Yeah,
Extra
absolutely.
information.
Put it over the shoulder, you know. Backpack, maybe a backpack.
Backpack, yeah, absolutely. Okay. Okay, so we have two more of these, and then we'll close up. A mantra, prayer, quote, or words of wisdom you continue to live by. You see them at the French, they have it around the stadium. At Wimbledon, they have their quote. What is one of those that Pocket Patrick has that has helped you and continues to help you? That's just like your go-to.
Well, I think it's be true to yourself. I mean, I don't know where that came from, but I think, again, it's about what we've been discussing, which is follow your passion. You know, I had different times in my life where I had to figure out, like I mentioned about my mom, you know, she was like, you should go to law school, Patrick, because, you know, it's going to be too tough being a tennis player. So I had to like look in the mirror and say, what does Patrick want to do? Like, what's my passion? You know, even when I got into broadcasting, you know, I still have this, you know, fun back and forth with John. I'm like, you know, I got into broadcasting before you because I was actually doing some TV in Europe when I was on the tour. So he kind of scoffed at that because everybody says, oh, you followed your brother into broadcasting, kind of thing. And so the same, but it was the same deal. Like I had to figure out, and I made some, you know, mistakes along the way where, I mean, not mistakes, but, you know, I was going to go to Columbia Business School. I'd been accepted into the executive program. And, you know, I was like, do I really want to do this? And it was kind of like, because it was like the pressure from the, you know, somewhere else, like the outside world. You should be successful, or you should be a business person, or you should go to law school. And so at all the, you know, couple of different junctures in my life, I had to be like, what do I want to do? And actually one time when my wife and I were first married, and I think it was when I just, maybe I hadn't become Davis Cup captain yet, but I went to work at like an investment bank and I like 2 or 3 days in, I was like, this is not for me. And I called her and she's like, just come home. She's like, just come home. Like, this isn't, you know, she could see that I was miserable. And so I've been lucky that I've had opportunities, you know, within tennis to, you know, do different roles, but I always felt that at the end of the day, like I was true to myself, you know, what I wanted to do. When I left the USTA in player development and I took a little bit of a break from doing other things except for the TV work, you know, I called my brother and I said, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, I want to get back into doing something else, particularly maybe with kids to help. And he's like, man, you got to come to the academy and help me run the academy. And so, you know, again, it was kind of going along with my brother, but at the same time, it was, okay, like this is a great opportunity, and this is, you know, a beautiful setup for me. And then I got the opportunity to be the president of the Hall of Fame, which didn't necessarily make my brother happy, you know, about me maybe spending some time away from the academy working with the Hall of Fame. But again, it was something that I was, you know, passionate about doing something a little bit different, but that was still in the tennis world. So I've been extremely lucky that I've had a lot of opportunities, but I've always like, you gotta look inside yourself and find, you know, the answer. The answer is within you, you know, so you got to kind of, you know, get rid of the noise of whatever's out there. You have a few people that you trust, you know, that you could talk to, but at the end of the day, you got to do what you want to do.
You heard it from Pocket Patrick.
Yeah.
The answer is within you, which is so wise. I ran into your mom once in New York City, and she said to me, she goes, you know, and she was a nurse, as you mentioned. She said, I could never do what you do every day, watching those kids and watching them suffer. I just couldn't do it. And I'm glad you do it. And then, I don't know if you know this, Andrea Leand, who also played on the WTA Pro Circuit, she became a lawyer. She graduated law school, and you know, that's not an easy task either, as you know that with lawyers in your family. So there's just so many things to open up in this episode that audiences I hope will love, because you're you know, they see you, but they don't get to get this much of your personality from commentary because you're so often, you know, taking care of what's in front of you on a tennis court or, you know, whatever sports stage or political stage or news stage is happening. So I just, thank you so much. I mean, Pocket Patrick is a great way to start the day and be in the day. So
Amazing.
I'm just gonna have to get like a hat or a t-shirt made with this. So thank you again.
I feel so honored to be on with Double A, Andrea and Adriana. So
Thank you so much. So
yeah.
excited.
So thank you for having me, and I can't wait to see you in New York. So we'll
Likewise.
please
Absolutely.
text me when you show up, and we'll make sure we see you on Sunday or Monday.
All right,
Wonderful.
absolutely. And also for everyone out there that's listening, you know, thank you for listening. You know where you can find us at littlestar.org, all of our announcements. And this, you can watch these episodes. You'll watch me tearing up on my little story about coming full circle with tennis.
Me too. Yeah.
And certainly if you just want to listen to it in your car instead of watching, it's, you know, that's where Spotify and all those other places. Host Karen Vasquez will be joining us very soon again, and we send her hugs and love. And I'll see you at the Open. Patrick, we'll be there. We'll be there helping kids and giving them the time of their life and swinging, getting on the tennis court with them and teaching them a little bit, but teaching them a lot more about life.
Don't forget, it never hurts to have a good piece of wood around. Andrea, okay, remember that.
I'm taking one more screenshot. Hold on.
Thanks for having me. Here, take one more screenshot.
Thank you so much. Yes, 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
So
Take
exciting.
care, ladies.
All right, take care.
Thanks
all
for
right.
having
See you
me.
soon.
Thanks again. Bye.
Yep.